Despite standing before the absolute highest intelligence in the entire human federation, the senior Lu family elder maintains a remarkably polite and calm demeanor. He grants the Supreme Machine access to his household's transaction data, though he strictly mental encrypts everything outside the requested inquiry. A massive torrent of information instantly floods the space, completely enveloping both figures in a swirling hurricane of complex codes and records. The supreme intelligence, known as One, simply raises a metallic arm and extends a single finger to touch the raging stream of digital records. In a split second, the heavy encryption crumbles away completely, allowing the machine to instantly scan every single relevant trade history. Turning to the silent robot, the senior Lu family representative asks if the thorough inspection proves his clan had no part in the catastrophe. One confirms that the transaction records are completely accurate and entirely clean, yet immediately pivots to a far more pressing concern. Because unmatched geniuses hold supreme importance for all of humanity, the entity insists that the Lu family take Lu Mingxi into custody. The high-ranking mechanical god refuses flatly, arguing that protecting his family's rights must take priority over unproven suspicions. He eloquently defends individual liberty, warning that sacrificing innocent people without concrete evidence opens the door to total tyranny. A synthesized mechanical voice simply agrees with the sentiment before the entire robot begins trembling violently from top to bottom. Countless metal components scatter everywhere as the vessel shatters into worthless scrap, marking the sudden departure of the Federation's supreme consciousness. Meanwhile, miles away in a private villa, Lu Mingxi paces back and forth in absolute panic over the massive trouble dumped on his head. He hasn't waged a divine kingdom war in nearly a century, yet somehow he has become the prime suspect for a catastrophic disaster. His mother and father suddenly arrive at the villa, looking at their panicking middle-aged son with expressions of deep helplessness. Seeing his saviors walk through the door, Lu Mingxi immediately drops to his knees and hugs them while crying about his utter innocence. His mother gently pulls him up from the ground, casually noting that the family has already blocked the Federation's coercive investigation orders. Reader, he quickly realizes his own parents assume he is entirely guilty and simply came to help him sweep it under the rug. His father sternly reprimands him for meddling outside his tier instead of preparing for his own divine kingdom wars, offering quiet praise. Left completely alone in the villa as his parents depart, Lu Mingxi throws his head back and lets out a helpless roar of absolute despair. Walking away from the chaos, the middle-aged woman finally breaks her silence to ask her husband if their son really pulled off such a terrifying feat of corpse cultivation. The man stops dead in his tracks and scoffs at her, pointing out that among low-level gods, corpse cultivation is rare enough that only their boy fits the bill. He wears the unbearable pride of a father whose academically challenged son suddenly brings home a perfect score, entirely unbothered by federal investigators. The mother's jaw drops as she recalls how her darling boy spent hundreds of years crying poverty during holidays and aggressively begging his brothers for red envelopes. Reader, she fell for his humble, honest act for all those years, utterly played by a brat who was hiding his god-tier capabilities right under her nose. Waving a dismissive hand, the father tells her to just be happy their kid is thriving, noting his war performance makes him as valuable as any peerless genius. He decides that once this whole mess blows over, they are transferring the startup shares in Taichu City over to Mingxi, so the boy finally has a family fortune. Exchanging a knowing glance, the proud couple beam with uncontainable smiles, entirely convinced that their unassuming son has finally made them proud. Meanwhile, in the virtual world, the Federation's highest intelligent life form, One, materializes as a massive data construct inside the Sima ancestral lands. One calmly explains that federal law restricts direct intervention, but urgently demands that the Sima family mobilize gods to protect Ma Huainan's kingdom. The Sima family's intelligent life form responds instantly, confirming that their designated support team is fully prepared and can deploy at a moment's notice. With a final robotic affirmation, One's colossal data figure gradually dissolves into nothingness, leaving the Sima family to execute their deployment. In another corner of the virtual world, a sweating Ma Huainan eagerly intercepts the familiar data figure the moment it reappears before him. His voice carries a thin, desperate edge of fear as he asks for the verdict, banking entirely on the Sima family to bail his kingdom out of ruin. His brief confidence had completely shattered after laying eyes on the enemy's army of more than 300 S-class war weapons on the battlefield. Knowing ordinary gods barely qualify to own one or two, he realizes no corpse-cultivating veteran could ever possess such an astronomical arsenal. A terrifying suspicion grips him. Could it be that this isn't Yang Fan at all, but rather another major family using him as a pawn to strike at the Simas? His trembling hands steady just a fraction when one's mechanical voice finally confirms that reinforcements are officially on their way to his location. Snapping back to reality, he hurriedly ejects his consciousness from the virtual space to place his final, desperate hopes on the incoming Sima reinforcements. Deep in a Sima villa, Sima Yurao calmly slashes spiritual vein investments by 30%, unaware her smartwatch is about to ring with a critical call. Sima Yurao abruptly breaks her deep trance within the divine realm as her phone rings urgently beside her. Pulling herself back to reality, she immediately picks up the device to answer her brother's incoming call. Her brother, Sima Zhao, asks on the other end whether she still owns a procurement company handling disposable war supplies. He mentions that a family member's divine kingdom has been brutally invaded by hostile forces. Sima Zhao explains that the family desperately needs a massive bulk purchase of military goods to supply the rescue team. He adds that this massive order will help her clear out old inventory and recover from her recent losses. Overjoyed by the unexpected financial lifeline, Sima Yurao thanks her brother profusely for thinking of her company. However, her relief quickly turns into sharp curiosity about whose divine kingdom is currently under attack. Sima Zhao's tone hardens significantly as he reveals he has just sent battlefield footage straight to her Feishun application. He warns her that the brutal siege is directly tied to a previous investigation targeting Yang Fan's divine kingdom. Stunned by the unexpected name, Sima Yurao leaps to her feet and immediately opens the messaging application on her device. A massive virtual projection instantly materializes across her wall, showcasing a nightmarish landscape of total war. The brutal battlefield reveals endless waves of rotting zombies clashing with modern firepower beneath a burning sky. More than 300 colossal flesh and blood catastrophe mother nests tower over the carnage, pumping out relentless nightmares. Sima Yurao's pupils contract sharply as a freezing chill rushes from the soles of her feet straight to her head. She cannot fathom how over 300 S-class war buildings were built just a month after the investigation began. Sima Zhao cuts through her panic with a deep warning, revealing that a high-ranking deity is secretly pulling the strings behind this catastrophe. He identifies the mastermind as Lu Yanran, the mother of the youth named Lu Wan. Sima Zhao adds that the family suspects the true architect is the Lu family's withdrawn human prodigy, Lu Mingxi. He orders his sister to stay entirely out of the conflict and transfer all her war supplies to the family at a 10% markup. After hanging up the phone, Sima Yurao stands motionless for a long time as cold dread settles deep into her chest. The memory of Yang Fan's polite, gentle smile at the banquet suddenly flashes back, filling her with an unearthly terror. Back on the battlefield of the Divine Realm, a massive spatial fluctuation tears the upper atmosphere apart in a blinding flash. One spatial passage after another rips open, vomiting a massive tide of elite support legions onto the ravaged soil. 500 billion elite troops sent by the Sima family surge into the ruined world like an unstoppable metallic wave. Martial artists, traditional cultivators, and intelligent mechanical legions equipped with Class A war machines flood every corner. Wang Chonghe and his exhausted federal squad finally exhale a long breath of relief as the heavy reinforcements sweep past them. Wang immediately orders his surviving main force to pull back from the front lines and initiate a defensive rotation. Wang Chonghe decides against retreating fully, whispering to his comrades that they should stick around to run some guerrilla warfare. He reminds them they cannot walk away empty-handed after young Master Ma promised 20 million military merits to each of them. 10 powerful phantom projections of divine consciousness materialize simultaneously in the upper atmosphere, their terrifying pressure causing the earth to tremble. The lead figure steps forward to address the hostile forces gathered below. Sima Jin steps forward as a third-rank deity of the Sima family, addressing the unseen enemy with extreme politeness. He acknowledges that Ma Huainan severely violated laws by investigating other people's divine kingdoms without authorization. Sima Jin smoothly announces that the Sima family is fully prepared to offer Yang Fan more than enough compensation for the breach. He politely asks if they can simply drop the entire incident right here and move past the bloodshed. The roaring guns fall into an eerie silence across the battlefield, as tens of billions of soldiers wait for a response. Every single combatant holds their breath, acutely aware that a single word could trigger an apocalyptic escalation. Reader, diplomacy is nice and all, but when you spend a month building 300 mother nests, apologies usually require a bit more than words. All eyes remain locked on the horizon, waiting to see if young Master Lu accepts the buyout. Inside his divine kingdom core, Yang Fan frowned at being addressed as young Master Lu. He knew the Sima family would easily connect this sudden divine war to his camp. Sima Jin calmly waited out the silence before offering 100 S-class resource-type buildings as a personal bribe. Ma Huainan stood beside him, his expression twisting in absolute rage. Ma Huainan seethed as he realized the Sima family held his enemy in such high regard that they dared not strike back. He swore to remember the name Lu Mingxi for ruining his life. Yang Fan felt entirely relieved upon hearing the terms and chuckled at his stolen identity. Someone in the real world had already handed him a bulletproof background to hide behind. Far away in the Lu family territory, Lu Mingxi sneezed loudly while browsing various expensive goods online. He calmly added 1 billion blood spirit monkey bodies to his cart. He stacked his digital shopping cart with a horde of corpses in the netherworld and an A-level war building. With a satisfied grin, he checked out, confident his mother would foot the bill. Reader, he did not think this through. Instead of the usual successful payment ping, his communicator lit up with an incoming call from his mother. When Lu Mingxi tried to sweet-talk her into funding his divine kingdom, she screamed at him for playing the victim and hung up instantly. The line went dead, leaving him staring blankly at his watch before he dropped to his knees in tears. He wailed aloud, asking how he was supposed to leave without her financial care. Back on the battlefield, Yang Fan gave the order to launch the offensive without mercy. Yang Shi's eyes flashed with a cold light as he unleashed the waiting artillery. Countless intelligent weapons fired simultaneously, sending a torrential rain of dense energy beams crashing toward the enemy lines. The entire sky blazed with terrifying firepower. Sima Jin's face twisted as he ordered a defensive formation to protect his troops. A gigantic light blue energy shield rose up, stretching across the sky to block the cannon fire. Wave after wave of energy cannons slammed into the barrier in deafening explosions that dyed the clouds red. The persistent bombardment only managed to ripple the surface of the shield. Seeing the stalemate, Yang Shi immediately targeted the enemy's war machines and ordered the suicide squad forward. Zombie generals leaped into action to bypass the human believers. A zombie general landed directly on a heavy mechanical weapon that was firing a giant golden club. The creature triggered a miniature nuclear bomb strapped to its chest at point-blank range. A deafening blast erupted as the miniature nuclear bomb detonated, swallowing everything in a blinding flash. Even Class A war weapons were blown completely to smithereens. As more war machines were obliterated, the pale blue energy shield began to dim rapidly. Sima Jin roared for the frontline infantry to hold off the rushing zombies at all costs. Human martial artists rushed forward, their blade flashes and hammer strikes tearing through the charging undead. A zombie general had its head cleanly severed by a long-swung sword. Another zombie was intercepted mid-charge by a massive hammer that caved in its chest. Yet these suicide troops refused to retreat, even as their bodies failed them. Their final moment, the battered zombies detonated their hidden explosives without hesitation. A brutal shockwave swept across the crowd, consuming numerous human believers on the spot. Wave after wave of zombie generals swarmed across the blood-soaked terrain with a single, ruthless objective. They cared nothing for their own survival, only slaughtering every enemy in reach. With the enemy shield weakening and the suicide squad tearing through their defenses, the war reached its bloodiest turning point. Neither side was willing to back down. Behind them, Yang Shi's expression grew increasingly cold as he ordered the immediate release of ordinary zombies across the front. He demanded that every single corpse pill be consumed immediately by the troops to bolster their frontline strength. Furthermore, he commanded his subordinates to bring up all volatile poisons refined specifically within the pill spirit realm. Without wasting a single second, Yang Shi initiated Plan B to turn the tide of his grinding slaughter. Bottles of lethal poison were quickly uncorked, and heavy volumes of noxious fog began to spread rapidly across the active war zone. Every variable on the battlefield was factored directly into his hyper-optimized calculations. Reporting directly to the Marshal, frantic scouts warned that the penetrating power of enemy intelligent weapon energy cannons was constantly increasing. Those destructive beams were projected to exceed the current defense limit of the catastrophe's hive very soon. Faced with this collapse, Yang Shiyi ordered 5 million corpse graves pushed straight to the front line. He ordered his commanders to distribute their firepower evenly and cast aside any fear of heavy losses during the charge. The massive tomb of 10,000 corpses was commanded to forcefully ram the enemy vanguard and completely shatter their formation. Class A war buildings stood like sturdy mobile fortresses right in front of the advancing enemy lines. An urgent report soon reached the marshal warning that the opposing side possessed a vast quantity of Holy Spirit water. This blessed liquid had seriously disrupted their army's intended advance route and was neutralizing their rotting shock troops. Yang Shiyi frowned slightly at the setback before barking out new instructions to counter the holy flood. He commanded his men to dump barrels of putrid liquid across the contested paths without hesitation. Their dark gods had long prepared enough of these vile war resources to completely coat every single advance route. Large amounts of putrefied corpse water were spilled out until the purified ground became a deadly hazard once more. The entire battlefield began to spiral completely out of control as fresh alerts poured into the command post. When a panicked aide reported that the left army had suffered heavy losses and desperately needed reinforcements, the white zombie followers were dispatched immediately. Yang Shiyi warned his troops that since their adversaries relied primarily on cultivation paths, every single soldier must be equipped with spirit-breaking talismans in advance. Once those fragile spiritual energy shields cracked, the victims would instantly be infected by virulent corpse poison. He remained entirely calm amidst the chaos, functioning like a Cold War machine. At this moment, Ma Huainan's divine kingdom had been completely transformed into a suffocating purgatory. Casualties on both sides climbed rapidly as mountains of corpse pills and special poisons polluted the entire atmosphere. The air grew thick with venomous fumes while corrosive liquids dissolved the once proud sacred earth. The structure of spiritual energy in the sky began to break down into chaotic, jagged currents that defied control. Aside from mechanical entities, both martial artists and cultivators felt severe physical discomfort, including obstructed blood circulation and hindered energy recovery. All combat effectiveness plummeted steadily as the toxic miasma crept toward the Sacred Heart. High in the sky, Ma Huainan's illusory consciousness had grown extremely weak, and his pale face was marked by naked fear. He discovered to his horror that the corpse poison had finally breached the core sanctum of his divine kingdom. The vulnerable residents hiding there, elders, children, and invalids, were now showing advanced signs of rotting flesh and bloodshot eyes. With a trembling voice, Ma Huainan begged Lord Sima for immediate assistance because his innocent followers could simply no longer hold on. Sima Jin, who was desperately trying to stabilize the front lines, turned around abruptly with his eyes blazing with annoyance. Reader, he did not appreciate being interrupted while frantically trying to plug 20 different leaks in his dam. Sima Jin told the frantic deity to find his own solution and go buy antidotes or holy water instead of bothering him. After barking that harsh dismissal, Sima Jin snapped his attention right back to the screaming carnage of the front lines. He couldn't help but start cursing inwardly at the sheer absurdity of the unfolding slaughter. This war was turning out to be brutally punishing, far beyond anything a normal campaign should require. If they were merely facing mindless zombie hordes, their massive troop advantage should have easily crushed the enemy. Believers in the corpse cultivation path were never known for exceptional individual combat prowess. Yet something deeply wrong was happening here. The opposing side somehow possessed an endless mountain of disposable war resources that they deployed with reckless abandon. Almost every single zombie follower carried heavy packages of high-grade munitions into every localized skirmish. They spent these items like trash, caring nothing for conservation as long as it inflicted damage. A truly bizarre scene unfolded where the attackers suffered heavier losses despite holding an overwhelming numerical and qualitative advantage. Sima Jin gritted his teeth in sheer disbelief as he realized the Liu family was throwing money into the fire like madmen. Reader, that family was simply too fucking rich for this world's economy. In just a remarkably short span of time, Sima Jin calculated that the war resources he had burned through reached hundreds of billions of divine points. This wasn't even a proper tactical engagement anymore. It was literally a furnace consuming pure cash. He watched handfuls of divine wealth get tossed into the bonfire, wondering if anyone in their right mind would ever spend this much. Sima Jin even began to experience a profound existential crisis, seriously questioning if a high-ranking deity was backing his stubborn foes from the shadows. While the Sima family was obligated to protect Ma Huainan after he exposed his coordinates, everything in this harsh world had a strict price tag. He absolutely refused to let his own elite vanguard be wiped out entirely for someone else's sanctuary. Those elite believers constituted the core fighting force of their own divine kingdom, and heavy losses would cripple their development for centuries. Family subsidies could never cover such catastrophic deficits, leaving Sima Jin increasingly agitated and inclined to retreat. The thought of cutting their losses and abandoning the doomed kingdom crossed his mind with growing urgency. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the sprawling conflict, Yang Fan watched the back and forth slaughter with steadily relaxing shoulders. Judging by the brutal attrition rate playing out across the valley, both sides had locked themselves into a relentless war of attrition. This grueling stalemate was precisely the outcome Yang Fan had hoped to orchestrate from the very beginning. Yang Fan calmly instructed Yang Da to purchase a massive quantity of flesh and blood energy and feed it straight into the life essence conversion pool. Since the frontline forces had suffered severe casualties, fresh battalions must be continuously drawn from the Eternal Corpse Mine. Those unyielding reserves were dispatched in a steady stream to plug every gap in the trench lines. With 100-fold evolutionary talent backing his rise, Yang Fan refused to care about a mere dozen third-tier gods standing in his way. He swore he would grind his enemies down to dust through sheer inexhaustible endurance and endless financial pressure. Yang Da immediately acknowledged the command and rushed off to execute every directive without delay. Alchemists within the Pill Spirit realm worked tirelessly around the clock to refine toxic drafts that would continuously feed the front lines. Procurement agents bought up every single disposable war supply available across major regional markets without haggling over prices. If that sheer volume still proved insufficient, Yang Fan intended to throw every last void warship and mechanical war puppet into the meat grinder. Yang Dabao stares down at the raging war across the frontier, promising to keep an absolute vigil over every single movement without a single flaw occurring. Yang Fan nods in acknowledgement before slowly withdrawing his divine consciousness from the realm, deciding there is no need to keep watching the front lines directly. The entire battlefield has devolved into a relentless stalemate, with both factions pouring endless resources and troops into a brutal war of attrition. He knows that an intelligent life form with a vast database handles command far better than he ever could, making more precise judgments than any human mind. Realizing that staring at an unchangeable situation only drains his emotions, Yang Fan stretches his stiff neck and decides to step back from the stress. He snaps his fingers to summon an intelligent robot, ordering the machine to prepare a full spa treatment along with several massage assistants for him. Over at the Liu family villa, Lu Wan sits in her private study conducting a tense video conference with her corporate subordinates about heavy financial reserves. Her corporate manager cautions her that they lack sufficient reserves of Divine Kingdom deduction cards, warning that purchasing them now incurs a massive premium. Lu Wan coldly orders him to keep purchasing regardless of the cost, demanding that the simulation succeed within 2 years or the executives face forced resignation. When the manager asks about drawing cash flow from the head office for war supplies, she refuses and decides to transfer the funds directly through her divine realm. Before the call can conclude, her smartwatch abruptly vibrates with a forcible incoming request from a family member that interrupts the corporate meeting. Dismissing the corporate manager without hesitation, Lu Wan answers the new call and immediately demands to know why her cousin Gu Le is contacting her. After a brief and cryptic instruction to meet in the virtual world, Lu Wan dons her headset and materializes inside her cousin's sterile white private space. Goulet wastes no time in flighting a glowing electronic panel across the table, telling Lu Wan to examine the battlefield footage playing on the screen. Lu Wan stares in disbelief at the playback showing Ma Huainan's divine kingdom overrun by intelligent weapons and over 300 S-level war buildings. Assuming this must be a powerful corpse-cultivating deity her husband hired to crush Ma Huainan, she eagerly asks if they can recruit this terrifying force. Goulet shakes her head and shatters her assumption, revealing that this devastation is happening directly inside Ma Huainan's own home territory. She explains that the Federation's top intelligent life form has investigated all 5 families, and their intended target is likely about to be wiped out entirely. Goulet drops the final piece of the puzzle, revealing that her husband recently spent 200 trillion divine points to buy 200 million corpse tombs. Stunned to realize Yang Fan kept this entire cataclysmic operation secret from her, Lu Wan stands in silence, swallowing her bitter grievance in the quiet room. Learning that Lu Wan is just as much in the dark as everyone else instantly washes away Gula's discomfort and fills her with a smug little wave of relief. Confronting a monstrous genius like Ma Huainan always demands a terrifying toll, even from elites of their stature who normally never feel the pinch. Downstairs in total bliss, Yang Fan lounges lazily in his plush recliner while automated mechanical arms rhythmically massage every inch of his body. The heavy door flies open with a sharp crash as Lu Wan storms into the room brandishing a virtual reality headset with an expression of pure murder. Reacting purely on instinct, Yang Fan snaps his hand up to effortlessly snatch the heavy metal helmet out of the air before it cracks his skull open. Flash that signature grin and ask your wife if she wants a massage too, reader, because that strategy always works out so well when she is furious. Glaring at her utterly relaxed husband while remembering her own frantic months of running ragged, Lu Wan takes a deep breath to contain her rising fury. Their consciousnesses dive into the virtual realm where Gula wastes zero time charging across the blinding white space, straight toward Yang Fan. Gula grabs his arm with wild enthusiasm, praising his insane ability to handle Ma Huainan so fast, while she and her cousins suffered exhaustion. The fog clears instantly in Yang Fan's head, as he realizes the exact moment his elaborate secrecy has completely and totally fallen apart. He tries a weak little cough to buy time, realizing his paranoid efforts to protect the secrets of his divine kingdom have completely blown up in his face. Lu Wan narrows her gaze and demands straight answers about the terrifying corpse-cultivating deity who supposedly swooped in to save the day. Goulet cuts right through the tension with a smug smile, asking her cousin if she seriously fails to recognize her own flesh and blood. Lu Wan freezes dead in her tracks as Goulet drops the name Lu Mingxi, pointing out that by seniority, the guy should be her great-grandfather. Snapping her head around to glare at Yang Fan, she demands to know how on earth he roped such a terrifying family patriarch into helping him. Yang Fan's face twitches uncontrollably because he is just as desperate to know who this Lu Mingxi guy is and why everyone keeps blaming him. Noticing his troubled silence, Lu Wan immediately jumps to conclusions about binding divine contracts and heavy transactions that cannot be spoken aloud. Sensing the opening to play the ultimate devoted husband, Yang Fan hardens his heart, puffs out his chest, and leans hard into the misunderstanding. He clasps both of their hands in his, laying on the thickest emotional speech about duty, responsibility, and how guilty his conscience feels. Pulling both women into a crushing bear hug with zero hint of a joke, he seals his heroic cover story with a declaration of undying love. Goulet's eyes blow wide in sheer disbelief at the stunt Yang Fan just pulled out of nowhere. The sudden move leaves her completely stunned, struggling to process the sheer audacity of the action. Lu Wan abandons all her usual composure, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist and weeping openly like a frightened child. The formidable executive lets her tears flow unchecked against his shoulder. She confesses through her tears that her divine kingdom still holds over 200 trillion divine points in liquid funds ready to deploy. With trembling lips, she insists he never has to shoulder every burden alone. She vows that if that looming she dares use any divine kingdom contract to threaten her husband, she will get her mother to intervene. She promises to make sure the blackmailer suffers severe consequences for his greed. All her initial annoyance and creeping doubts instantly vanish as she finally understands the real motive behind his secrecy. She realizes he kept quiet simply because he cared too much to let them suffer any losses. He never felt inferior despite his humble origins, choosing instead to grind endlessly toward true strength. He refused to coast on his wives' status or lean on them to live an easy life. On the other side, Goulet watches this emotional soap opera unfold with a completely blank stare and a baffled mind. Reader, she was supposed to be running a business merger, not watching a romance drama. She stares at Lu Wan and wonders when her famously ruthless, profit-driven cousin turned into this crying romantic. Her entire worldview is currently being ground into fine powder right before her eyes. Realizing his noble husband act has completely derailed into an unintended tearjerker, Yang Fan quickly releases his arms. He clears his throat and hastily tells them to stay completely out of the messy legal fallout. Right as Lu Wan opens her mouth to argue further, she abruptly stops as her personal AI beams urgent new data straight into her mind. She blinks against the incoming transmission and turns to brief the others. Upon hearing that Lu Mingxi is demanding an immediate meeting to see her husband right now, Yang Fan feels the blood drain from his face. If the blackmailer walks in here, his carefully crafted persona is toast. Rushing off his protests, Lu Wan insists on sending out the exact coordinates to settle the score once and for all. With her backing him up, she declares the blackmailer won't dare demand a single unreasonable concession. Goulet chimes in to support the move, pointing out that even if Lu Mingxi is centuries older, he is practically their junior by several generations. Backed by Aunt Yanron's immense influence, she figures the extortionist will fold fast. Listening to his wives enthusiastically arrange his own unmasking, Yang Fan silently retreats to a corner in total defeat. The sky has genuinely fallen, and his elaborate lie is about to crash down on his own head. A dark glint flashes in Yang Fan's eyes as he silently resolves to strip Lu Mingxi's divine kingdom core clean if the man ruins this for him. He starts praying that the blackmailer possesses at least a shred of common sense. Moments later, a projection of consciousness manifests directly within the private chamber as Lu Mingxi arrives on the scene. The powerful third-order god completely suppresses every trace of his terrifying aura. The newcomer immediately flashes a desperate, flattering grin and hastily greets Lu Wan with an overly respectful title. He practically radiates nervous panic in his frantic bid to appease the powerful executives before him. Lu Wan maintains a chillingly calm demeanor as she stares down the trembling visitor standing in front of her. She refuses to let him off easy and immediately challenges his brazen attempt at informal flattery. With a voice devoid of warmth, she asks him if he is completely confused about their proper family seniority. The trap is set, and the blackmailer is about to find out exactly what happens when you try to scam the wrong family. Lu Mingxi stands completely bewildered in the virtual space, trying to figure out why his clan senior has suddenly turned so frosty. Gods have such absurdly long lifespans that their family tree is a tangled mess, so they always address each other by age. Lu Wan steps right in front of her husband with an icy gaze, aggressively taking his hand and pulling him backward. That single posture places Yang Fan dead center as the undisputed core of the entire situation, leaving him entirely speechless. Yang Fan sits up straight with a tense expression, desperately racking his brain for some slick linguistic magic to smooth things over. Before he can even get a single word out, the whole atmosphere takes a wildly unexpected and ridiculous turn. Lu Mingxi suddenly charges across the room and drops into a furious knee slide that carries him 4 or 5 meters across the stone. He lunges straight forward and clamps both hands around Yang Fan's leg like his life depends on it. He breaks down into hysterical sobbing, wailing at the top of his lungs and weeping rivers of snot and bitter tears. He looks for all the world like an abandoned child who has just finally tracked down his long-lost father. Lu Wan stares at the pathetic display with her lips twitching involuntarily as pure bewilderment washes over her. Reader, she did not think this through when she rushed in to defend him against a total stranger. Goulet stands off to the side with an equally complicated look in her eyes as she processes the sheer absurdity of the scene. At that exact moment, she realizes she grossly underestimated Yang Fan and his terrifying network of secret connections. Lu Mingxi looks up from the floor with big, adoring eyes full of desperate anticipation and undying loyalty. He immediately offers to mobilize all the terrifying power of his divine kingdom to completely wipe out Ma Huainan. Yang Fan's face twitches uncontrollably as he listens to this complete stranger pitch himself as a loyal follower. He's sitting here wondering who the hell this guy is since they've literally never spoken a single word to each other before. Yang Fan takes a deep breath to steady his nerves and tells Lu Wan and Goulet to leave them alone to talk. The two women exchange a confused glance but ultimately choose to trust him, turning and stepping out of the virtual space. Once the doors close, Yang Fan invites Lu Mingxi to take a seat opposite him across the table. Lu Mingxi hastily wipes away his fake tears and snot with his sleeve, sitting down with a deeply embarrassed expression on his face. Lu Mingxi drops the tough act and admits with a bitter smile that he genuinely had no other choice left. His divine kingdom's true strength got exposed to the 5 great families, landing him in hot water. To make matters infinitely worse, his mother discovered just how many war-era buildings were stashed inside his divine kingdom. In a fit of rage, she completely cut off his living expenses and left him utterly destitute. Driven to the absolute brink of poverty, he begs Yang Fan to take him in and give him a steady job within the Yang group. He looks at Yang Fan with innocent, puppy dog eyes that scream, desperate job seeker. Yang Fan arches an eyebrow at the sheer audacity of the man and asks what kind of monthly compensation he expects. Lu Mingxi's eyes light up like neon signs as he eagerly suggests a modest 50,000 divinity points a month. Yang Fan shakes his head and instantly triples down, offering 500,000 divinity points a month for a special advisor position. Lu Mingxi happily accepts and trades his contact details over the Feishun network without missing a beat. Without dragging things out any further, Lu Mingxi lets his digital avatar dissolve into shimmering light and logs off. He heads straight back to the Lu family compound to wait for further instructions. Yang Fan is left standing entirely alone in the quiet hall, his expression hardening into absolute seriousness. He knows damn well that none of these ancient family gods are simple-minded or straightforward. There was never any chance Lu Mingxi would actually open up his divine kingdom's real coordinates for a public investigation. Instead, he chose the genius route of taking the blame up front and charging Yang Fan a hefty consulting fee. Yang Fan doesn't give a damn about a mere 500,000 divinity points a month, since his pockets are currently lined. What genuinely rattles him is the terrifying depth of Lu Mingxi's actual character beneath that silly facade. The man plays the role of a shameless, snot-crying mama's boy, while secretly reading every micro-expression in the room. Yang Fan realizes with a jolt that this supposed shut-in is hiding monstrous strength and a massive, terrifying secret. Back in the real world within the Lu family territory, Lu Mingxi opens his eyes with a satisfied smile on his face. He mutters to himself about the 500,000 divinity points rolling in every single month from his generous new son-in-law. An intelligent life form chimes from the wall to report that their investigation into Yang Fan and his mysterious corpse cultivator god has hit a dead end. Lu Mingxi simply waves his hand, casually ordering the agents to call off the entire search. His smile fades into a serious scowl as he weighs what he witnessed today, realizing Yang Fan's mental strength matches a mid-level god. He decides it is far wiser to avoid crossing such a dangerous anomaly and lets the matter drop. After escaping the virtual world just as his persona nearly collapsed under the pressure, Yang Fan takes off his helmet in an empty room. His tense muscles finally relax now that he has slipped through the trap completely unscathed. While he no longer needs his wife to squeeze resources out of the divine kingdom, the Lu and Gu family connections remain vital to him. Just as he weighs how to keep both wives sweet, Lu Wan pushes the door open with a tray of chilled fruits. Lu Wan places the fruit plate on the table and hurries over to ask gently if he needs any help bearing his burdens. Yang Fan pulls her right into his arms, affectionately rubbing her nose and telling her he cannot bear to watch her suffer. Hearing his warm words, a sweet smile spreads across Lu Wan's face, though she still lingers with lingering anxiety. She whispers a final piece of advice that he must reach out if he ever hits a wall he cannot smash through alone. Yang Fan nods lazily and flops back down onto his massage chair like he hasn't a care in the world. Lu Wan tiptoes out of the room, closing the door softly behind her so her exhausted husband can finally catch some rest. Out in the hallway, Lu Wan immediately pulls out her phone to fire off a text message returning those borrowed funds to Gulay. She stretches and lets out a huge yawn, shedding the immense weight she has carried for days. With a flick of her wrist, she uses her intelligent life form to suspend the calculation of Ma Huainan's divine kingdom coordinates. Reader, she was sweating bullets until just now, because targeting an elite genius guarded by federal tech is a great way to get sanctioned. If she had slipped up even slightly, federal regulators would have brought down the hammer on all her family businesses without blinking. Feeling the immense danger evaporate, a genuine, relaxed smile finally spreads across her face. Goulet blinks in utter disbelief when a massive torrent of divine points suddenly floods back into her divine kingdom's treasury. A triumphant grin spreads across her face as she realizes her troublesome problem has just vanished into thin air. The next moment, Gula scoops up little Gu Chengye into her arms, gazing down at her gorgeous son with deep pride. She tells him with a grin that his father turned out to be far more extraordinary than she ever could have imagined. She asks her baby if they should pack up and head straight to the front lines to find his dad the minute she graduates. Otherwise, she jokes with a worried laugh. His fierce aunt might just swoop in and steal his father away. Days bleed into weeks as Yang Fan sets aside fixed hours every single day to descend into his divine kingdom and steer the war. The two sides lock horns in a brutal stalemate, trading staggering blows across a blood-soaked front. Inside Ma Huainan's territory, the slaughter claims nearly 10 billion believers every single year on both sides of the meat grinder. But for Yang Fan, operating at a time flow rate 100 times faster, this endless attrition is mere child's play. The eternal corpse mine pumps out endless waves of fresh ghouls, feeding a constant frontline force of hundreds of billions of believers. A relentless river of corpse pills, talismans, elixirs, and miniature nuclear bombs pours into the war zone. The Sima family deities rushing to prop up Ma Huainan are scrambling just as hard to feed bodies into the furnace. They throw in everything they own, burning through divine spell scrolls, special siege weapons, and consumable defensive structures. The entire theater of war has long since devolved into an industrial-scale slaughterhouse driven purely by resource drain. 10 real-world days tick by, but inside the time-dilated Divine Kingdom, this grinding war of attrition has dragged on for nearly 10 years. Yang Fan slips out of the Divine Kingdom trance, opens his eyes in the real world, and lets out a cold chuckle. He notes that the total war expenditure hasn't even touched a single trillion divinity points yet, which is loose change to him. With his broken evolutionary talent, a protracted war of attrition is the absolute last thing he has to fear on this earth. Backed by stockpiles of billions of divinity points worth of reserve gear, Yang Fan is fully prepared to outlast whoever blinks first. Yang Fan kicks off his morning routine by shoving his bedroom door open, stepping out into the quiet hall with a slow and deliberate pace. Just as Yang Fan reaches the dining table, a metal intelligent robot whirs out from the kitchen, carrying fresh platters of sliced fish. Lu Wan strides over in a hurry, clutching an electronic version tablet and announcing that fresh good news has just landed. Yang Fan stares at Lu Wan with genuine curiosity, wondering what kind of breakthrough has managed to put that look on her face. Lu Wan explains that the video footage of Ma Huainan and Lu Mingxi clashing in the Divine Kingdom War has spread through the 5 major families. Lower-ranking deities inside the Sima family are flat-out refusing to offer support, and those already deployed are actively backing down. Many of these nervous gods are rushing to apply for family subsidies while frantically preparing to pull out of the meat grinder entirely. Yang Fan takes the electronic version from Lu Wan and scans the updated intelligence reports detailing the fractures within the Sima clan. Reader, he knows that massive family conglomerates run on shared interests, and lower-ranking gods only play along when the math works out. Scanning the internal Sima family chats and public news headlines, a genuine smile spreads across Yang Fan's face. Lu Wan asks if Lu Mingxi needs more war supplies, offering to transfer a mountain of resources she bought through the company for free. In barely 10 days, the war resources burned through by both sides on the battlefield have already exceeded 1 trillion divine points. With high-level believers dropping like flies, the actual divinity consumed by both factions has blown past 300 trillion divinity points. Yang Fan smiles and shakes his head, telling Lu Wan that she does not need to worry about funding Lu Mingxi's campaign. He has pushed his frontline war efforts so hard that even the most ordinary zombies are outfitted with corpse pills and heavy explosive tags. The truth is that his resource burn rate is still way too slow to outpace his own ridiculous procurement speed. Yang Fan sits comfortably knowing he can outlast the Sima family for another year if they want to keep burning cash. Lu Wan stops eating for a second, her eyes shifting slightly as she asks whether her husband is running a bit short on divinity. Yang Fan keeps his face completely unreadable, playing it cool and pretending he mostly relies on Lu Mingxi's centuries of savings. Lu Wan nods, completely reassured, drops a piece of fish into his bowl, and excuses herself to attend an urgent meeting. Upstairs in her private office, Lu Wan summons a blue light screen and asks for intelligent life form for the Yang Group's cash flow records.